Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Adam's Eats. How are we all? Hope you had a good weekend. Now today I've got a stonking little recipe for you, really simple, and that's my pork steaks with sauteed potatoes and caramelised apples. Now for this I'm using really thick cut steaks, but this would work equally as well if you've got some nice bone-in pork chops. It's Sunday today, so I went to the supermarkets, and generally speaking the ones in the supermarkets are a little bit thin and not really worth bothering with for this recipe. But by all means, if you're near a butcher and it's open, go in, ask for some nice thick bone-in chops and they'll go perfect with this recipe. Right, so let's get cracking because I'm hungry. If you hit that pause button, make a list of what you need, and the first thing we'll do is go and prep our spuds. Right, so let's get on and prep the potatoes. Now I'm using Desiree because they're ideal for this kind of recipe. Other good varieties would be King Edward or Maris Piper. Something that you would use for roast potatoes is absolutely perfect for this. So I'm just going to get some potatoes out the bag and we'll just get this out of the way. Now you're looking for about 2 medium-ish sized potatoes per person for this recipe. So we're going to get these peeled. Okay, and once you've peeled them, we need to chop these into chunks. So you just want to cut them in half and down lengthways and then cut them into chunks like that. You don't want them massive, but you don't want them too small either, so something like that sort of size. And then you want to get those into a saucepan and then repeat that with the rest of the spuds. Right, okay, so I've just filled the pan with water. And I'm now going to go and add a nice generous pinch of salt. Turn the gas on, and I'm going to bring these to a boil and then turn down to a simmer and then cook them for about 5 minutes, just so the outside edges of the potatoes are slightly cooked. Right, so these potatoes have had about 5 minutes simmering. I think they're done. I'm just going to test one. Yeah, you can see just the outside edges cooked, but they're still raw in the middle. So we'll turn off the heat, and these are now ready to drain. So once you've drained them, they're now ready to saute. So you want to get yourself a nice heavy base frying pan, get it onto a nice medium heat, and then add a good generous glug of olive oil. And once it's nice and hot, you can add the potatoes. Okay, so now we're going to go in with a nice generous pinch of salt and some freshly ground black pepper. Just give that a good thorough mix. Now these will take about 20 minutes to cook. What you're looking for is for them to be nice and golden brown on the outside, nice and crispy, and nice and fluffy on the inside. And at that point we'll add in some freshly chopped rosemary and a nice knob of butter. Right, okay, so we're about 10-15 minutes in, and as you can see they're going nice and crispy. So now we can add a nice generous knob of butter. And the reason I didn't add this in earlier is because you run the risk of it burning. So what we want is a nice rich buttery flavour, and also this will help with the colour as well. And then I'm going to add some really finely chopped rosemary, about 1.5 teaspoons. You don't want too much because it's quite powerful. And the reason it's this finely chopped is because it's a woody herb, and the last thing you want is to bite into a thick piece of woody rosemary. So make sure it's finely chopped. Give that another mix. Now obviously you would time this with your pork chops, but sometimes when you're filming it's not always possible because you're moving cameras around and stuff like that, makes things a bit difficult. But obviously about 10 minutes in you probably want to get your pork chops on. But this will quite happily sit on the back of the hob on a very low heat just to keep warm whilst we'll get on and cook the pork chops. Right, okay, so I've got my pork steaks here. As you can see they're nice and thick. This is what we want. I'm going to take these out and put them onto a chopping board. And I've got a garlic clove here and I'm just going to cut it down the middle. And then you just want to rub the garlic clove on each side of the pork chop. And the reason I'm doing this is because if I put the garlic in the pan whilst cooking it, it's just going to burn. So we want the flavour of the garlic, but we don't want any burnt, acrid garlic with it. So just rub it all over. Yes, I'm going to wash my hands. Now I'm going to season each side with some salt and some pepper as well. Again, the other side. And those are now ready to cook. Right, so I've got my frying pan here. I know it looks a bit ropey, it's had a lot of use. Get that onto a medium-high heat. Again, add some olive oil, and then you want to make sure it's nice and hot before we put the pork steaks in. Right, once your pan is nice and hot, we can get our pork steaks in. That's the sound you want to hear, nice sizzle. Now you're looking to cook these for around about 4 or 5 minutes each side. It all depends on how thick your chops are. But what you're looking for is they need to be nice golden brown on each side and cooked all the way through. So I'll give these 4 minutes and then we'll flip them over. Right, so these have had about 4 minutes. Let's flip them over. There we go. That's what you're looking for, a nice golden brown colour. So we'll give those another 4 minutes that side, and just before they're ready, we'll add a nice knob of butter and then we'll put the apples in around the edge. Right, so the chops are almost there, so I'm just going to add a smallish knob of butter, and then I'm going to add the slices of apple just to the outside edge. The type of apple I'm using is braeburn. The reason is you want a nice crisp, firm apple that can stand up to cooking. If you use like a cooking apple, like Bramley, it's just going to turn to mush. And all you're looking to do is just to lightly caramelise each side of the apple, which should take a couple of minutes. Right, so as you can see, the apples have nicely caramelised, but they've still got some nice crunch to them. So we're just going to get all of this onto a warm plate, and then keeping it on the heat, we're just going to add some chicken stock. This is homemade chicken stock. We're going to make a nice little reduced pan sauce, so just mix all that around and make sure you lift off all those porky bits off the bottom. Turn the heat up and then reduce that sauce a bit, and then we're ready to plate up. Right, so let's plate it up. We'll get one of those nice juicy pork chops, and then a few of those nice caramelised apples. And then here I've got just some simply boiled green beans, and then some of these nice crispy rosemary sauteed potatoes as well. Another tip for you as well, any juices that have collected, that can all go back into your pan sauce, which we'll now of course put over our pork chop. You don't want loads because it's quite salty and flavoursome, so just nap some of that over. And there we are folks, that's my pork steaks with sauteed potatoes and caramelised apples. Right, let's tuck in. Right, okay, let's dive in. I'm gonna go for some of this pork chop first, and a bit of that pan sauce as well. That's so juicy. Now it can be quite hard to cook pork chops, but you improve the flavour and you improve the juiciness a lot more if you let it rest. So once you've taken it out, put it on a nice warm plate, just leave it for a couple of minutes, it'll be fine. And all those juices will just reabsorb back into it and just help it keep it juicy. Let's go for one of these apples. I mean, it's a classic, isn't it? Apples and pork work really well together. Let's try some of these potatoes as well. Crisp, fragrant with that rosemary, and they've got a slight nuttiness from that butter as well. I'm not going to bother with the green beans, we all know what they taste like. But what I will say folks, is that is one delicious plate of food. Anyway, that about wraps up today's episode folks. Hope you make the recipe, give it a go, let me know in the comments if you do. Before I go, I'm going to do a quick shout out to one of my subscribers who also has another channel, and her name is Maverick Baking. Some of her food photography is absolutely stunning. She makes really nice cakes as well, so go along and have a look at her channel and tell her I sent you. And I'll see you fine folks next time for more tasty fun and frolics, and I'm off to do an absolute ton of washing up. I know, glamorous life here folks, glamorous life.